There are powers on Earth too hidden to be seen and conspiracies too vast to comprehend. For years, the world has seen facts distorted, reality manipulated, and the truth concealed. Tonight, we uncover the real meanings behind ancient aliens and their symbolism. Aliens, angels, the jinn, Elohim, seraphim, cherubim, or interdimensional entities. Are they the same? They have one thing in common. They have full mastery of time and space and are not confined to our three-dimensional reality. They reside between worlds, in pockets known as quantum states. They can coexist between physical and spiritual planes. We'll look into the ancient extraterrestrial phenomenon, the symbolism, and particularly the comparison with flying saucers. We'll look at the controversial possibility that the aliens are not passive observers, but instead have infiltrated human life and are an intrinsic part of the fiber of society. They coexist and live among us as a parallel society. The implications regarding alien intrusion is a staggering argument. For the most part, it's hardly entertained within modern ufology. What is Scathology, angelic sailors, and the Ophanim?
You are listening to VERITAS. If this is your first time, welcome home. To listen to tonight's full interview and all of our material, join the VERITAS family and click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the VERITAS store for focused life force energy, MMS, CBD pure hemp oil, Divinia water, pure organic sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and VERITAS seasons, and other great products. And if you want to get in touch with Mel, want to be a guest on this radio program, have a guest suggestion, or have feedback, just click on the contact button of our website at veritasradio.com. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. And now, here's your host, Mel Hostelrick.
Today's special guest is symbologist, comparative linguist, and author, Pierre Sabak. Pierre is an expert on ancient symbolism and etymology, and is widely recognized as a leading academic in the field of religion, mythology, mysticism, and the esoteric. An academic, Pierre Sabak is the author of The Murder of Reality, Hidden Symbolism of the Dragon, and Holographic Culture, which will be the focus of tonight's interview. He is currently writing The Invisible Kingdom and The Angelic Invasion. To learn more, visit his website, pierresabakbooks.com, which is also linked at ours, and also Pierre Sabak on YouTube. Pierre joins us directly from the UK, which is very late. Hello, Pierre, and welcome to VERITAS.
Hi there. It's brilliant to be on your channel, so thank you very much for inviting me. I guess we should start right at the beginning, which is Scathology, which is the study of angelic boats and vessels. And I think that this might actually surprise your viewers, but within the angelological tradition, the angelological traditions are equated with these angelic ships and these angelic vessels. And this is really the remit of Scathology. Scathology is the study of these boats within the religious and mythological tradition. And so Scathology is coming from the Greek etymology of scath, which is a boat, from skapto, to dig out. So the conceptualization of these angelic boats or vessels are as these hollow boats or these hollow containers. And certainly within the Judaic and the Mediterranean traditions, the two primary ways of describing these boats, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail later on, is either as a spinning wheel or as a spinning shield. And the shield itself is equated with the symbology of the boat, whereas the wheel is equated with the chariot. So the angel and the boat are really synonyms. And this is important to understand because it's really at the basis of the angelological tradition. And this is really, if you like, a classical discourse which has been edited or redacted. And so when we look at the word classical, when we're referring to classical mythology, what we're actually referring to is classis, which is a naval fleet. Okay, so the etymology of classical is coming from classis, which is a naval fleet. And the label naval fleet is really relating to the angel. This is the angelic tradition, which is otherwise known as the naval tradition. And so the angel themselves, they are depicted as these angelic sailors. And so when we go into the etymology of an angel, I mean, traditionally the Greek word angel, angelos, which is a messenger. But when we take this back into the ancient Arabic, we see that la'aka, which is to give a message, where the original root of angel originates from. But the word angel is polymorphic. And again, this is very important when we go into symbolism. And I'm going to try and keep this very, shall we say, simplistic for your audience, because sometimes my audience says that that I tend to go into too much detail. And so I'll try and keep this simple. So therefore, we have what is known within symbology as polymorphic symbolism. This is a word with multiple meanings, and we find this also with the word angel. So, for example, malak, an angel, is polymorphic of malak, a sailor. And so the angels within the ancient Semitic are viewed as angelic sailors. But as I said before, the classical tradition, classis, a naval fleet, which pertains to the angelic tradition, is classified. And this is where we get our classifications within military secrecy. This classified tradition is related to classis, which is a naval fleet, which goes back to the traditions of the angelic sailor. Now, what's very significant is that when we actually delve even further, and particularly when you go into the biblical studies and when you are looking, for example, within the Old Testament and the Torah, you have the representation of God as the Lord of the host. And I think that this is really important to emphasize to your viewers, that the Lord of the host is really depicted as a lord of a naval retinue. Okay, so he's a lord of sailors. And as I said before, these sailors are identified with angelic carriers, which are equated with wheels, which in the Aramaic is the Ophanim wheels, or they're equated with flying shields. But I really want to delve into the etymologies of the Lord of the host. So just to repeat, so that the viewers are not lost, malak, an angel, is polymorphic of malak, a sailor. Okay, so the angels themselves are viewed as sailors. And I think it's very interesting that when you go into the rabbinical traditions, the rabbis, they themselves equate the word angel from the root amar, which is to command, to speak or to command, amar. Now, again, this is a type of encryption, because amar is equated to amara, which is a naval fleet. Again, so the angels themselves are equated with this naval fleet, which is identified with a boat or a ship, and is equated with Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the host. So I really want to try and frame this argument for the audience, so that the audience are very clear who and what the Lord of the host is. Now, the Latin word host refers to an invading army. And again, you find this within the Septuagint, for example, within the Greek translation of the Old Testament, in which host is rendered as stratos, which is an army. The word stratos informs the English words institution, status, statute, as in a law. And as we shall shortly find out, I'll explain to you how the maritime law is actually equated to this classified tradition, or this classical or naval tradition, which is identified with the angelic sailor. So I want to now try and frame the argument in terms of Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of the host. The etymology of Sabaoth, meaning host, Saba is an army, but the word can also have a connotation of a naval host, as in Sevet, which is a crew, of a vessel, and again is related to teva, the modern Hebrew word for an ark, which is used in the Bible to denote both Noah's Ark, or also the receptacle which carried Moses, the wicker basket which carried Moses. Again, the basket is a cytological symbol, or it's a symbol of a vessel which is used to denote a boat. And it works in a very similar way in the English language. When we say the word vessel, it's polymorphic. It can mean a container, or it can also mean a boat. And this is also the same within the Greek and within the Semitic. They use the vessel as a symbology of a boat. So, and again, we're seeing that there's a relationship between Sabaoth, Saba, an army, Sevet, a crew, Teva, an ark. And again, we're seeing that there's a relationship between Saba, an army, and Sefer, which is a viper. Now, this is very important because the Lord of the host, in particular, or more specifically, he's identified as the Lord of the seraphic host. Now, what do we mean by the seraphic host? And I think that this is really important to elaborate to the viewers. And this is certainly hidden behind the occult tradition, because within the occult tradition, you have two representations of the angels. So, for example, you have proto-human angels, who are the cherubim. And then you have the seraphic host, or the seraphic angels, which are these non-human angels, which in today's parlance would be identified with an alien. And so, and both of these angelic entities are partitioned within the occult tradition. So when you look at the priesthood itself is split between these partitions, between occult knowledge appertaining to the seraphic host, which are these non-human angels. In today's parlance, this would be an alien. And then we've got these proto-human angels, again, which are identified with boats. And I think that that's probably a good place for me to elaborate this connection with boats and angels, so that we can be very, very clear about what we're talking about. But before we do that, and I don't really wish to confuse your viewers, because when I start talking about angelic sailors, I tend to find that the viewers, they tend to get a little bit confused by what I actually mean by an angelic sailor. So I think I need to clear this up straight away. The angelic sailor is an alien in today's parlance. The symbology is equated with what we would identify with an alien. And again, the ancient arcane traditions, they come through into the modern traditions of ufology, into science fiction. So they are this hidden or classified tradition which inform modern science fiction.
Before you continue, Pierre, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure.
I want to ask a few questions to dissect a little bit more of the eschatology, the meaning of the words. I'm very curious just to set a foundation. First of all, this new book is called the Holographic Culture. Why that title? Also, what made you dissect all these words and connect dots? Because I'm listening to maritime law. And this is something I really want to dissect with you, because as you know, this is the law of, and I hate to say it, but this is the law of the land these days, maritime law. What made it so prevalent? See, all these questions are popping up, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but please give us those foundations first.
Okay, what would you like to deal with first of all? The
holographic culture.
Okay,
why
holographic culture. Right. When I started looking into the angels, I quickly began to realize that the way in which they were represented within the biblical, the Quranic, and the apocryphal traditions they were basically represented as a paradoxical race. And by this, I mean that they were both represented as physical beings, and so they could be described as an elake, which is the Aramaic word for a high creature or a living god. Again, the terminology is polymorphic. Or they could also be described as the Ruach Elohim, which are the high spirits. Now, the Ruach Elohim, the high spirits, when we break this down, are pretty much equivalent to the jinn, because the word jinn in the Aramaic means a spirit. And so the Elohim are described as the jinn. They are interchangeable. And again, the old etymology for jinn is related to gen, which is a serpent or a worm. And this actually gives us a clue, because as I said earlier, the lord of the host, Sabaoth host, is related to Saba, army, and Sepheth, a serpent. And so the lord of the host is related to the lord of the seraphim. The seraphim and the jinn are identified with Sirius. And again, this goes back into astrotheology. And again, you need to go back into the ancient Arabic. And again, this goes back into the angelological tradition. So going back to the terminology of a holographic culture, they've deconstructed the mechanics of waveform reality. And by this, I mean that they can come in and out of our temporal reality. Now, our reality is composed of what Pythagoras described as musical notes. These different notes equate to different dimensions, and they have found the means of dissecting these different dimensions, and therefore being able to penetrate or interpenetrate these multiple dimensions. So they are, if you like, masters of holographic reality. Now, I believe that they are a technological species and that they have deconstructed this scientifically. The evidence for this is found within the apocryphal literature, which describes that they have deconstructed knowledge. This is why they can live so long, because they are masters over physical matter. And this is equated certainly in the traditions with the Greek traditions of the demiurge. In the Greek traditions, the demiurge, demiurgos, is a public craftsman. The public craftsman created humanity. Now, the public craftsman in today's language is a genetic engineer, and the genetic engineer is equated with the planting of life on the earth, which in the Greek traditions is known as Panspermia, but in the Quranic traditions is referred to as the second creation. And this is important because within the second creation, Allah doesn't create man, rather he recreates man from this proto-seed, and this is then planted, which is the Adamic man. So yes, a holographic culture are masters of waveform, and this is something which we need to be mindful of. And this is what is causing a lot of, shall we say, schisms or problems within ufology, because certainly from, let's say, the late 1970s onwards, the fashion has been that the ufological tradition is equated with a control structure, which is much more, shall we say, energetic, and which is a construct rather than necessarily something which is physical. And so, if you like, there is this, I call it the alien dialectic, this dialectic or argument between, are the entities physical beings with nuts and bolts craft, or are we dealing here with this control structure which could be spiritual or this some kind of energetic force? Now, when you begin to look into this closely, and you look certainly within the Apocrypha traditions say that they are both spiritual and physical. In the same way, humanity is both physical and spiritual. But what separates the Elohim, the high ones, from humanity is that they have deconstructed the waveform. Now, this is not beyond humanity's capabilities. We're on the verge of deconstructing the waveform ourselves. So we are just, if you like, at this precipice of being able to deconstruct the waveform. We already have the language for the waveform. And again, this idea was going back into Platonic metaphor and Neoplatonic philosophy. So within Neoplatonic philosophy, for example, the implicated order would be a universal form. The universal form is the imaginal realm of ideas, which is the spiritual realm, which is all potentiality. If you like, this is the infinite, but we're dealing here with the large infinite because the Greeks made a distinction between infinite numbers. You had a large infinite, which was the spiritual realm, and then you had the small infinite, which is the physical realm, in which ideas are manifested. The implicated order is manifested as the explicated order in quantum physics, which are particularized forms within Platonic philosophy. So the Greeks had already deconstructed this, but in today's parlance, we talk about the waveform and the particle, which is essentially the implicated order or the order of universal forms, which is explicated into particularized forms, as how Plato would have described this.
So when it comes
that's a holographic culture.
When it comes to holographic culture, and I'm just trying to dissect all of this, I love that word because every word has, as you said, polymorphic meaning, multiple meanings.
Sure.
When we think of angels, when we think of aliens, Elohim, the cherubim, the seraphim, the jinn, are we talking about the same concept here? It's just that now we see it more of a modern craft operated by beings from another dimension, planet, you name it, other galaxy. Are they the same that thousands of years ago people were reporting as angelic beings?
Absolutely. And this can be proven through etymology. Etymos, the study of words, coming from the Greek root etymos, meaning truth. It's a very complicated answer, that is. But essentially, yes. So, for example, as I said before, there were two orders of angels. You have the cherubim and the seraphim, and they are both equated to ships and craft. So, for example, with the seraphim, you have the word seraph, which is related to sapan, a sailor. The P and the F morphology is very closely related in the Indo-European languages, and safina, which is a ship. So seraph, sapan, and safina, a ship. Again, you've got the same with the cherubim as well. So you've got the cherub, which is related to carib, which is a boat. And so the cherubim themselves were also equated with these angelic boats and vessels. And again, when we're dealing with the terminology emissary, the word emissary is equated to a missile, because the Lord of the host is flying wheels or flying shields were deemed as a type of missile, which is equated with the host. Now, the missiles in the ancient world were not the elongated missiles that we think of in today's language, but what they were these shields. And so they would, in the ancient world, they would take large shields and they would fill them with burning sand and typically excrement as well, and it'd be red hot. Sometimes they would put in red hot oil as well, and they would tie these large shields together, and then they would fling them in catapults, and they would spin around, and they would be used to destroy fortifications, sink naval fleets, and also to scatter the enemy forces. So, if you like, these flying shields were very majestic and were equated with the Elohim and these flying vessels. And as I said before, we see that there is this connection with Seraph and Safina, which is a ship, or you would find a similar connection with the cherub and carib, which is a type of naval vessel. Actually, it's a small type of landing craft, which is equated with the cherubim. But we're finding these multiple word plays found within different languages as well. So, which is polyglottal symbolism.
You mentioned etymology, of course, and I mentioned eschatology, not to get religious, but etymology, the study of the history of words. And I mentioned eschatology for the following reason. Let me just define it first. The part of theology concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul and of humankind. Speaking of the soul, you mentioned that these beings, we can fill in the blanks of whatever meaning we gave them earlier on.
Yeah.
You say they have the technology to manipulate our souls. Can you please explain?
Right, okay. When we're talking about our holographic culture, it's not just unique to one race of beings. In order for beings to get to different star systems, the way that it's done is through deconstructing the waveform. This is my understanding from studying this. But the thing is that once you begin to deconstruct the waveform, not only does this allow you to travel from planet to planet or star system to star system, but this also allows you to be outside of time. But more importantly, it also allows you to deconstruct the spiritual realm as well. So all of these different realms are interconnected. And so when we're dealing with a holographic culture, they are masters of all the worlds. So all the worlds in terms of that they've deconstructed time, they have interplanetary flight, but they've also intercepted and deconstructed the spiritual realm. And by the spiritual realm, I'm talking about the realm of ideas. And so the realm of potentiality. And this is where when we die, we go to the spiritual realm, which is the realm of ideas, which is the implicit order, where we are then manifested and recycled in the explicated order. So that's, if you like, the reincarnation of the soul. Obviously, the other trajectory is to be assimilated with the absolute, which is another trajectory. So there are different trajectories. Now, mastery of the soul pattern was very important to the initiates and to the magicians as well, because the mastery of the soul pattern meant that one could control one's incarnation. And when I'm talking about incarnation after death, I'm not necessarily talking about one's future incarnation, because you can also control your incarnation into the past, because time doesn't exist. And so when you die, it is possible to incarnate both into the past or into the present. And it's also, I believe, possible to incarnate into a better version of the future or a better version of the past. And so mastery of the soul pattern was something which was deemed as very important by the magicians and by the high initiates. But the other route, and again, Buddhism talks about nirvana, which is, if you like, the death of the self, of the ego, and the re-emergence with the absolute, which is God, which is the absolute, the supreme, the sublime. It's the information field. So yes, this is what we're talking about. And the Elohim, the high ones, they have absolute mastery over these different realms, but many different entities have mastery over these different realms, because in order to leave one's planet, one of the ways of achieving this is through deconstructing the holographic realm, which is in essence is the deconstruction of the spiritual realm as well.
Before I ask you the following question, I just thought of, would it be safe to say, if these beings master time and space, that distance is not an issue for them? They could theoretically disappear and immediately appear anywhere in the universe, right?
Yes. And we're dealing with, to use an analogy, technology very similar to what you would find on Star Trek. So they have this ability to materialize and dematerialize. But we also know that they are equated with the star system Sirius, and I can go into that later on if you wish, and I can demonstrate that both the jinn and the seraphim are one and the same thing. There is some debate, shall we say, within Islam that the angels are different from the jinn, but when we look at the etymologies, it can be proven or established that the angels and the jinn are one and the same, but we can and that they're equated with Sirius. But we can go into that later. But if you have more questions,
no, that's fine. This is a flow of information back and forth. You mentioned Sirius, and I'm thinking of Sirius A and Sirius B. You probably know the anecdotes from the Dogon tribes.
Sure.
They discovered Sirius B, I believe, before the first, I think it was a German astronomer. I forgot exactly when it was, but it was way after way after the Dogon said it. Tell us more.
Okay, well, Robert Temple wrote that book.
Exactly.
He's an English professor, and he wrote the most definitive and certainly the most comprehensive and the most academic book in the English language on ancient aliens. I don't think it's been bettered, but I do think that my book is let's say, as important as his work. But there's been a 25-year if you like, space between my book and his book, which means that there hasn't been a lot of serious work into ancient aliens. I think the problem is that a lot of the work done into ancient aliens is just wrong. It's incomplete. It's disinformation. It's coming from the priesthood, because the priesthood control this knowledge, and they control both academia and they also control the alternative media. And so there hasn't really been much work done into ancient aliens, which there's been a lot of repetition, a lot of copying, but the problem is that a lot of the information out there is just problematic.
I'm glad you're talking about this. You mentioned ancient aliens, the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. You're referring to that, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, it's a little bit of a joke, unfortunately.
Well,
and
do you even consider them to be alternative media? Because I don't. I see them more as entertainment.
yeah, it is entertainment, but I think more importantly, this has been done on purpose. I personally think that this is a psyops. I also think that there's what they're trying to do is discredit the alternative media. So let's say when you say, okay, I'm part of the alternative media, they'll say, oh, well, you're a flat earther. And I think that they're intentionally trying to undermine the alternative media. I particularly think that they're trying to stop academics looking at this subject because, as I said before, the classical tradition, Classis a naval fleet, Malak an angel, Malak a sailor, is a classified tradition. And this is a redacted tradition. So as far as I know, I'm the first person talking about this because I'm the only person who's talking about angelic sailors. And I'm the only person who's ever bothered to look at the ancient etymologies and to identify the sailor with the angel. This is probably founded within the Kabbalistic Judaic system, but you would have to be initiated at the highest levels and you would have to be affiliated to the sons of the boats, who are essentially angels. And I will go into that later on as well. But the sons of the boat are equated with Sirius symbolism. So we have this problem because there is a movement to try and undermine the ancient alien hypotheses. And this hypothesis has been particularly aimed at, it's aimed towards the academic. They do not want academia to go anywhere near this subject. I mean, I think one of the reasons is because academia is used to steer narrative, it's used to steer discourse, and again, it's used ideologically as well. And so therefore, when you begin to realize that the angels are one and the same with an alien, and this narrative has been used to steer religion, language, culture. It's not just suddenly a new idea which has emerged in the 1940s with Roswell, but this thing goes back into the ancient world. Then this begins to deconstruct a lot of, shall we say, the symbology of governments, of religion. And so I think that they're very anxious that this should not be deconstructed. And so therefore it's been hidden away with the priesthood. There's been an attempt at a lot of disinformation which has been aimed at academics, so that academics who are familiar, let's say, with the theological traditions, with the Apocrypha, will instantly dismiss what is being said as being ludicrous. And so hopefully I'm here to try and address that, shall we say, that imbalance.
And I have to say, when you think about who owns History Channel, it was sold to A&E Networks, which is owned by Disney. We can't expect the truth coming out of them. And as you said, and I don't mean to get conspiratorial here, but we have to.
Sure.
Because as you said, the priesthood, and I'm glad you distilled it to the lowest common denominator. The priesthood owns these. And if you're going to have the truth coming out, which may be detrimental to the current paradigm, they cannot release that information. But what I mentioned about series A and B, just for the folks who are listening, Alvin Graham Clark, 1844, was the German astronomer. The first one was Friedrich Bessel, the German astronomer. He discovered the series A, January 31st, 1862. Then series B was discovered by Alvin Graham Clark. And he found this faint companion, which is called Series B, or affectionately called the pup. Now, how do you think that the Dogon tribe, without the technology, that's what we're told, that they didn't have the technology, but you look at some of the monuments and the megaliths around the world, and some people say they were the priests from the times of the Egyptian dynasty that escaped, and then through oral tradition is how they keep their knowledge alive. What do you say about that?
Yeah, they got their knowledge where everybody else got their knowledge, whether it was the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Mayans, the Japanese, the Chinese, and their themes are identical. And this is really found within what I describe as the artifact. The artifact is this alien code. It works on polyglottal symbols. So word plays which are repeated in multiple languages, and this is a type of encryption which alludes to or points to the aliens or the angels. As I said, the terminology is interchangeable. The angel is a synonym of an alien, and this is found in the Aramaic word zar. Is a polymorphic word. It means an angel, but it also has the additional meaning of an alien, a visitor, a foreigner, a stranger. And so Zar is equated with Sira, which is a boat, because as I said before, they're equated with vessels. And again, it's equated with the princely lineage or the royal lineage, Sar, which is a prince or a commander of a vessel. And those word plays are repeated out within multiple languages. So, and if we go into this Sirius symbolism, it's a tri-star system, and the third star is hidden. And I think that this is also important when we're beginning to deconstruct Sirius and its correlation with the seraphim and the jinn. So, for example, the third star is hidden. Now, when we look at the etymology of jinn, we see jinn, which is equated to jana, which is to hide or to conceal. Now, remember that the jinn are said to be born of fire, and so the jinn are equated with the seraphim. The word seraph is equated with serapha, which is fire. And so the jinn are equated or correlated with the seraphim. So the seraphim are sometimes referred to as a watcher. So there is this correspondence between Sopheth, a watcher, Seraph, a serpent, and Serapha, which is fire. Now, fire is this denomination, if you like, of Sirius. The terminology Sirius in the Arabic, Sira, which is Sirius, it has a connotation in the Arabic of Sir, which is a mystery, a secret, sacred. But again, we're seeing that Sira is coming from the root Sara, which is to sparkle. Now, to sparkle is Sara, which is a spark. So Sira is to sparkle, the sparkling one. Sara is a spark. And this is really important because the terminology spark is used to refer to seraph, which is a serpent, and serapha, which is fire. So the seraphim, otherwise the jinn, a serpent, the jinn are born of fire, are identified with Sirius, the sparkling one, or that which is equated with a spark. As I said before, we've also got the third star of Sirius, which is hidden, jinn, jana, to hide or to conceal. So both the jinn and the seraphim, otherwise known as the watchers, are identified with Sirius. Now, as I said before, they're therefore identified with angelic sailors. So there is this correspondence between Seraph, Sapana sailor, Safina, which is a ship. So in the modern parlance, we would describe them as alien because they're non-human in appearance. And again, there is really that connotation with Zar, an angel or an alien, and Sira, which is a boat. Now, what's very interesting is that the word Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor, is also found within the Kabbalistic terminology of the Ben Sira. Now, the Ben Sira is literally translated as a son of a boat. But what's very interesting about the word Sira is it works on a special type of wordplay. It's known as dictic paranomasia. So the Hebrew word Sira, which means a boat, in Arabic, when you render it in Arabic, Sira is Sirius. So the Ben Sira, which is a son of a boat, is a wordplay on the Arabic Ben Sira, which is a son of Sirius. The son of Sirius are identified with the sons of a boat, which are equated with an angel. Now, this angelic lineage is also identified with the lineage of the king. Hence, there is this correspondence with Malak, an angel, and Melech, a king. As we said, Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor. Now, this is translated into English as kingship. Kingship is denoting the naval lineage, which is the angelic lineage, which is identified with the star system Sirius.
So when we're discussing all of this, I'm thinking of the chariots that even in the Bible is discussed.
In Ezekiel, that's right.
Exactly. The wheels of Ezekiel. Is that what it was?
That is correct. Yes. Well, they're known as the ophanim in the plural, and the ophonym, and I think that this is very interesting because in the 1950s, Frank Scully wrote a book and he talked about how the UFO was constructed from a series of cogs. And when you look at the word ophonym, it literally means the wheels. And so both Ezekiel and again in the book of Jeremiah, the wheels are described as a work of the Lord, literally a construction of the Lord. And so they are deemed as physical objects. So this is not just a pie in the sky kind of phosphorescent object. This is something which is physical and which was hidden. Again, in the symbology, they're often referred to Shen, which is a cog, which can also be represented as a tooth, which is equated with a prophet, because the word Nab, which is a canine tooth, which is used to denote or is an occult signifier of the dog star Sirius. But Nab, a tooth, is used to denote Nabi, which is a prophet. So the tooth is often used to denote a prophet, and it's found within symbolism, such as the sewing of the dragon's tooth, which is equated, the dragon is equated with the seraphim. And so therefore we see that there is this, if you like, relationship with Sophefa Watcher and Seraph, which is a serpent, but also within the Greek, Drakon is coming from Drakane, which is to watch or to gleam. This essentially is denoting the Erin in the Hebrew. Erin are the watchers or the shining one. Which is a watcher, or which is light. Now the Erin in the Testament of Amran, which is an apocryphal text, are described as having a visage or having a face like a viper. So we know that the Erin looks like serpents, which would denote that the Erin are one and the same as Sophefa Watcher and Seraph, which is a seraphim. As we said before, the seraphim, the shining ones, are identified with Sirius. In the arcane traditions, they're also equated with the Illuminati, and we can go there in a moment. But I really want to just pin down the fact that the Erin are one and the same with the Elohim, and this is found within polyglottal symbolism. And this is a real, if you like, important point which we need to reiterate. So, for example, the Elohim is equated with Erin, which is a watcher or a shining one. So the Elohim, which is the generic word for the gods, it's used in the plural form, and Erin, again plural, for the watchers or the shining ones, and is equated in the Greek, in the polyglottal symbolism, with Theos, a god, Theros, a watcher, Phos, which is light. So this is identical. We can also say that Theos, the god, is equated with Therion, a beast, and this is because the watchers are identified with a serpent, which is a type of dragon, as we made an allusion before, Drakon and Drakos, which is an eye. And so when you see the symbology of the all-seeing eye, what you're really looking at is a representation of the watchers or the dragon, which is identified with the seraphim. And as I said before, the seraphim, Sophefa Watcher, Seraph a serpent, Seraph a fire, or Erin a watcher or a shining one, is represented as shining to denote Sirius. And so the eye is often shown as shining. And so this is an important symbology within the occult. Now remember that the word occult itself is coming from the etymology to hide or to conceal. And again, this is another representation of Jinn, coming from the root jana, to hide or to conceal. But remember that the word Jinn, which means a spirit, is equated with Gen, which is a serpent or a worm. In the biblical tradition, the serpent is described as the most subtle creature. And again, we're seeing that relationship, if you like, with a seraph, a serpent, shofar, which is an apparition or an appearance. But again, in the Greek, you would find similar word plays between the Old Semitic word fein, phenu, and a phantom. So these word plays are playing out in multiple different languages. Again, Akon, an appearance, is found with Akan, the Babylonian word for a serpent. In the Semitic also, Aya, which is an appearance, Aya, which is a serpent. So again, these word plays are uniformal or polyglottal, and they show that the serpent has this power over the waveform. They can dematerialize. They have deconstructed the waveform, but we are very much on the brink of deconstructing the waveform ourselves. We're not that far away. So again, so once time is out of the sequence, then this obviously has profound philosophical implications for a culture which is not subject to the, if you like, to time, to the ramifications of time.
I wonder this. You mentioned Sirius and the dog. Then I think of the Dogon and their connection with Egypt. And it makes me wonder if the statues that we see in Egypt of this humanoid-looking dog, and then you see the Anubis, is it Anubis a dog? Is there a correlation here between all of these? Anubis, there you go.
Yeah, well, Anubis, again, nubes is a cloud, the Nubagina in the Latin. So the Nubagina is those who are born of a cloud. And so that in itself is very interesting. But the dog is a very important signifier because it signifies the dog star, and it's encoded in multiple languages in both convergent and polyglottal symbolism. So just to give you some examples of the correspondence of the dog, and again, some of the symbology of the dog is coming from the fact that wolves and dogs, they bay with the rising of Venus, and Venus is known as the light bringer, which is a symbol of Lucifer, but Lucifer leads the way, points the way to Sirius. And so in symbolism, in order, if you like, to hide the signifier of Sirius, sometimes what they do is they use the symbology of Venus, which is the lightest planet within our solar system, and is therefore mirrored with Sirius, which is the brightest star within our known cosmos. So, but there is this correspondence with the dog, and so we find in English there's a correspondence between God and dog, but it's a polyglottal symbol. It's also found within Arabic. Allah, God, is equated with awa, to bark. In the Latin, lato is the old Latin word for Apollo, but is equated with latro, which is to bark or to snarl. Again, latro is equated with latens, which is to hide or to conceal. It's where we get the word Latin from, because the Latin language hides or conceals. And this is very important because it's equated with the barker, or one who snarls, which is equated with the formation of language. But again, even in the Japanese, the word kami, God, is equated with kami, which is a wolf. And the wolf is a signifier of the Japanese reptilian deities, Tengu. The Tengu means heaven's dog. But again, they are equated with language, as in tango, which is a word. But we're finding similar word plays also within the Hebrew, seraph and sapha, which is a language. And again, you're finding similarities also within the Arabic with tab and a snake. Tab, which is an addition, because the serpent is equated with knowledge, and it's also equated with books as well, and with writing as well. So, for example, in the Japanese, the Tengu deities are equated with tango, which is a word. Again, they've encrypted their association with language. In the ancient Babylonian, this would be Akan, which is a seraph, equated with Akim, which is a king. But the terminology Akim, a king, is equated with Aka, to talk. So the serpent is often referred to as the talker. The serpent likes word games because it's encrypted itself within human language. And this is a concealed tradition, which is a cult, which goes back to the symbology of the dragon. But essentially, when we deconstruct it, there are two occult traditions. There is the occult tradition of the seraphim, which are these non-human angels. And then there's the occult tradition of the cherubim, which are these humanoid angels. I describe them as the proto-human because they are the original seed which was used to create the Adamic man. The Adamic man was this amalgamation which was created, this genetic configuration created from the hominid species on the earth, and is also genetically compatible both with the seraphim and also with the cherubim. So the Adamic man is something which is quite different and appears to be equated in the symbology with the Ishim, which is a human angel, more specifically an Adamic angel. But the Adamic angel seems to, although identified with the cherubim, seems to be different from the cherubim, and the cherubim appears to be this proto-human lineage, which is distinct from the Ishim, which are these Adamic angels. But essentially, we're all going back to the Ben Sira and the son of a boat, Malak an angel, Malak a sailor.
Panspermia. Let's go with Panspermia. I'm thinking of the Ridley Scott movie Prometheus, which I presume you probably watched. Do you think that was an accurate moment? Perhaps not what Hollywood is telling us, but more or less what created the Adamic civilization?
Yeah, I mean, this is a complex mythology. I've only partially decoded it, and it's something which I'm working on in a current book, which goes into very deep astrotheological symbolism. But if you like to give your viewers or listeners a basic rundown of what occurred, and again that this is very fragmentary, and it's coming from traditions such as Homer. Remember, the word Homer in the Latin is equated with man, homologous, that which is the same. As I said before, there's this humanist tradition, and then there is this non-human tradition, like you've got Ophid, but again the word Ophid is a serpent, or Ovid. So all these different philosophers, Pythagoras, Pythagoras, the speaker of the serpent. Euclid is a diptych paranomasia, or a wordplay on Euclid, to copy or to ape, in the Arabic kurd, which is an ape. Again, the if you like, the elements of geometry is this humanist tradition. So you've always got within philosophy the humanist tradition equated with the cherubim angels, and then the Pythagorean tradition, Pythagoras, the speaker of the serpent, which is this seraphic tradition. In Freemasonry, it's represented by the two pillars of Freemasonry. Again, it's also represented by the double insignia of the triangle, which makes the Star of David. Again, in the you've got a wordplay on talat, which is 3, and tolat, which is a worm. When you combine the two triangles together, so if you like, the triangle represents the worm. Again, it has a connotation of the dragon's tooth, which equates with the prophet. But when you combine the two triangles together, you have 3 and 3, which is 33 degrees of Freemasonry. The Western rites of Freemasonry, rabbi and master, is equated with rabbi, which is Western, which is the Occidental tradition, occidere, which is to kill or to murder. Hence the rites of Freemasonry, sacrificial rites. So we're dealing with layered symbolism, but going back to the symbology of panspermia, the Greeks, Anaxagoras spoke about panspermia, and he talked about spermatos, which were seeds or stars. And so the Greeks really equated the stars as seeds. And again, this is why seeds and seed baskets are very important within the Greek mystery religions, because the spreading of the seed is equated with the night sky. The night sky is the seeds in the sky can be spread on the earth. And so there is this equation within the Greek between Syros, which is a corn pit, and Sirios, which is Sirius. Again, because this idea of panspermia, and the Quran borrows a lot of these ideas. And I think that this is what's very interesting about the Quran. And this is certainly found within, shall we say, Gnostic sects within Islam, but it has not been deconstructed because a lot of Muslims just are not willing to go there. I think it was deconstructed in the past, but it's been veiled and hidden away. But much of the Quranic text is actually influenced through Greek philosophy. We're talking about Hermetic literature, Neoplatonic philosophy, Valentinian literature. And so even, for example, with Iblis, the word Iblis, although Arabic scholars will trace it back to Balasa, which is to suffer, but Iblis is really another etymology of ubris, which is the Greek word for pride, arrogance, in particular pride which tries to supersede a deity. And this is what Iblis tried to do. So Iblis is the Arabic transliteration of the Greek word ubris. And we're finding also within the Quranic traditions of the Kiramin Katibin, the two noble recorders, they really go into the Socratic traditions of the dialectic, which is the dialogue. Now, Socrates established the dialectic, which is this dialogue, or shall we say, the argument and the counter-argument, which is the linchpin of psychoanalytical theory, because it goes back into the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, or as what Cicero would have said, the rational mind and the irrational mind. The irrational mind is the daemonic mind. The daemonic mind is the mind which can interface with the daemonic realm, which, as I said before, is the irrational realm, because this is the realm of ideas, which is the imaginal or the spiritual realm. So these are the ideas which, if you like, have informed both Greek philosophical thinking, but also have informed our own modern sciences and our own psychoanalytical theory as well. And again goes into the Jung's concepts of the archetype. The archetype is really just another enumeration of universal forms, which is the implicit order, which was described in Platonic and Neoplatonic thought.
I have to ask you this. You mentioned Latin, and that brought up a few thoughts up in my mind.
Okay.
We didn't know anything about the Egyptians until the Greeks told us. The Greek gods were then transformed into Roman gods, which were then morphed into Christianity. Latin was a critical part of this. What I'm about to say sometimes offends my Christian brothers and sisters, and it's not my intention, but I have to ask you for your perspective. Sure. When you look at Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, we see Jesus, the Son, S-O-N, or S-U-N. Then on each side, we see the 6 and 6 apostles. If you put them in clusters of 3, those are the seasons. Those are the months. Yeah. You see where I'm coming from? What do you see here in astrotheological terms?
Yeah, I was going to say it's astrotheological. I think what's quite interesting about Christ's disciples as well, and I would ask your listeners to look at this and look at Raphael and other artists, is that when you actually look at the apostles, the disciples, some of the disciples have halos over their heads and some of them don't. And this is basically forming a distinction between the Ben Adam, those who are born of the earth, and the Ben Elohim, those who are born of heaven, which would be equated with the son of a boat, which is equated with this angelic lineage. And so this is something important because the halo, although in the outer mysteries is identified with the sun, within the inner mysteries it's equated with Sirius, and Sirius is equated with the Ophanim wheels. So one way of representing the Ophanim wheels is to represent the wheel as shining. So there is this correspondence in the Aramaic between Ophan, a wheel, Pana, which is to turn or spin, but Ophir, which is the old root, meaning radiant or golden. So this is a golden wheel, which is equated with the sons of a boat. And so the disciples of Jesus are both split between the Ben Adam, the son of Adam, and then the Ben Elohim. And I think what's quite interesting in the Christian tradition, and this was certainly played out within the politics of the Nicene Creed, is that there was this partition. And this partition really goes back to the humanist split between, shall we say, the human tradition, which is equated with the cherubim. We said it is the Euclidean tradition in the philosophical tradition, and then the Seraphic tradition, which is the Pythagorean tradition. So the debate within Christian theology was essentially, was Christ the Ben Elohim, the son of the Elohim, or the son of God, the monogenes, one bloodline, or was he equated with the Ben Adam, the son of man? And in the Nicene Creed, they said that he was both, because the church was split between the humanist and the seraphic tradition. And so they synthesized the dialectic. In the dialectic, you have the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. And the church synthesized the argument, and they said his father was Joseph, and so they therefore traced Jesus's line all the way back through Joseph to King David, I think it's in the book of Matthew. But they also said that he was born of a virgin and he was the Son of God, and therefore he was sinless and he was godlike, which was again very similar to what the Roman emperors said about themselves. Caesar himself, Caesar, in the Greek word for Caesar, Caesar, in the Hebrew is a diptych paramecia of Caesar, meaning a space alien. You know, and I think that's very interesting because Zar, as we said, is an angel or an alien, a visitor or a stranger. But Caesar literally means a living alien. And so again, this is going back to the Elake, which is a high creature, in today's parlance, an extraterrestrial biological entity. Elake can also be translated as a living god, but in a literal sense, this was literally a living god. This wasn't some kind of abstract notion of just a conscious sentient force. This was an angelic force which intervened within human history. It was represented as a god who was a commander of a naval host, which were identified with these wheels, which were described as physical constructions and which were buried under temples, or we find this symbology within the temple layout. So, for example, we see that there's a correspondence between Naus, which is a temple, and Nos, which is a boat. Again, within the church, you have a nave, which is equated in Latin navis, a boat. We would say worship, because you are worship or venerating these angelic vessels. Religion is coming from the root religare, to moor or to tie a vessel. And even the votive dishes in the ancient world, if you look at the votive dishes, you'll see that the dish is a circle with a small circle in the middle, or sometimes it's a tooth and sometimes it's a circle, but this was used to render the hieroglyph of Sirius. But importantly, this circle within a circle, which is used to render the hieroglyph Sirius, is also used to render a wheel. And the wheel is equated with the opening wheels, which are identified with the Ben Sira. And I think that this is an important point when we go into the second creation. When we look at the Ben Sira, we see that the word Sira, boat, the sons of a boat, they're equated with Zar, an angel, alien, stranger, or visitor. But Zar is also equated with Zara, which is to sow in the Arabic, Zaria, which is seed. And again, the word Sira, a boat, is created with Yetzira, which is creation, Yetzer, which is a creature. So they are identified with the planting of the Adamic human on the earth, which in the Quran is described as a second creation. And in the Quran describes that God took took the sperm and mixed the sperm within a receptacle. And so this is interesting because in the biblical tradition, again, Adam is created from dust, but again, there is this wordplay between Adamah, dust, and Adam. So Adam is created from Adam, which is skin. In the Quran, man is created from sperm. So again, the reference is referring to the planting of the human bloodline, which is the Adamic bloodline. In the traditions, the Adamic bloodline is equated with Mars, so there is this correspondence between Adam, red, and Mahadim, Mars. Mahadim, from out of Adam, which is Adam, which is red. So Adama, which is the red earth. So this is very interesting. But the Adamic races, when we begin to break down the etymology, they actually originated from Orion, but then moved they were reconfigured or remade from, in the classical philosophy, and it's very complicated, and this is something I'm going to be looking at in my new book, but essentially the Adamic races are equated with Orion, as are the Nephilim, and then they are planted on Mars, and then their bloodline is taken to the moon and then is planted on the earth. And so it's a complex mythology. And again, it's only partial, because we're dealing here with the fact that we have amnesia. We have not been given the truth about the origins of humanity. So humanity is living within a state of amnesia. And in terms of symbology, we are illiterate. We have not been given the keys to the symbolism. One of the keys to symbolism is through language. So we're dealing here with symbolism and language. But there are other types of keys as well, such as numerology. So you can also, and this interconnects with language as well, alphanumeric symbolism, which then interconnects with astrotheology, gematria, and these other occult sciences, which are very deep and which are embedded within our culture, but at a very esoteric level.
Hold it right there, because that's a huge download you're giving me, and I want to close this segment with what you just said.
Sure.
The limitations that were imposed to us by language. I think that's critical. And if there's something that we can agree on, is our hidden history. I would say that what we know of our history is the tip of the iceberg, if at all,
Sure.
if it's even true. Sure. I have my own doubts about Adam and Eve. I've read a few books that were confiscated. One of them, the story of Adam and Eve. I don't know if you've read it. It was confiscated by the CIA for decades, and it was edited. And I have the original version that tells us that we are the sixth incarnation of our civilization on Earth, and previous cataclysms have almost killed us, and we start again and again. But you mentioned the Kaiser. Caesar. I
Sure.
wonder if they're the same. For example, I'm thinking of Kaiser Wilhelm II. I'm thinking of the Russian czars. Are they the same term?
Same terminology, yeah.
Great. And one last thing before we go to break, I just want to say this. I'll get your reaction on the other side. When it comes to ufology, it seems that the Navy, at least in the United States, it's the branch of our military that has or had jurisdiction over the subject. Perhaps now it's the Space Force. But once again, I go back to angelic sailors. The word sailor denotes water, at least to me. So what is the connection between the sea and space? But we'll take your answer on the other side. How can people learn more about your work? Buy the new book and all the other books and your website.
Yes, that's right. Go to my website at Pierre Sabak Books. I've got a YouTube channel under Pierre Sabak, so just Google Pierre Sabak and you'll find my YouTube channel. I'm continually updating my YouTube channel. I try and put out information every week or every couple of weeks. So yeah, please leave a comment. I do try and answer some of my comments, but again, it's difficult. Sometimes I have a lot of work on, but I do try and at least answer some of the pertinent questions that your listeners or viewers may have. And I do try and engage with my audience as much as I can, time permitting.
Very well. Well, folks, don't go anywhere. I'm here with Pierre Sabak, he's very late where he is, so I'm going to come back really quick and start again. See you in the member section. I'm Mel Hostelrick. You're listening to Veritas.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas interview. To listen to the rest and all of our material, proceed to the member section or join the Veritas family by subscribing. Click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the Veritas store for Focus Life Force Energy, MMS, CBD Pure Hemp Oil, Divina Water, Pure Organic Sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and Veritas seasons, and other great products. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. Now, proceed to the members section or subscribe to listen to the rest of the interview. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for listening to Veritas. Because you don't want to believe. You want to know.